2022 has been one of the most volatile years in gaming that I can remember. Titles like Lost Ark, Horizon Forbidden West, and of course Elden Ring got the year on track early, but as spring turned to summer, it was clear that the momentum wasn't going to last. Hey there friends, it's Codiak here, welcome to Legacy Gaming. Today, we're taking a look back in time at some of the biggest games shackled with delays and looking ahead to what very well could be the biggest year in gaming in 2023. It's no secret that the first part of the year was a high for video game enthusiasts. Whether it was a massive multiplayer online game, a brand new RPG, or even a wacky looter shooter, there seemed to be something for everyone. The hype was all well and good until about April, and that's when I noticed something was off. For the most part, developers are smart about when they release their games. Fall and winter are often the biggest opportunities for AAA companies to sell games, as people are more inclined to stay inside for one reason or another. That creates room for indie titles to sneak in during the off-season to try and win over some fans. We've seen this recently with games like Stray and Cult of the Lamb. Most of the time, there are multiple high-profile games coming out within the same month, but this year, that's just not the case. I've talked about this in the past, but before the calendar flips to the new year, Livin and I spend a decent amount of time mapping out the next year. We talk about the games that we want to cover, how we want to cover them, and try and plot out a roadmap of sorts so we don't get lost along the way. Well, about 4 months into the year, that plan went straight out the window. It's no secret that delays have been a huge part of 2022. In fact, this year featured more major game delays than in any other year previous. Think about that for a second. It's remarkable. There's that famous quote gamers like to throw around about a delayed game being eventually good, a bad game being bad forever, and talk about taking a message to heart. I guess that's really the theme of this year, but to truly appreciate the scale of this exercise in patience, let's look back at some of the biggest games delayed into next year and try and wrap our heads around some of the logic behind the decisions. When I think of games that called their shot way too early, I immediately think of Starfield. There's no doubt the massive scope of this project was the main reason for the delay, but it's pretty incredible that the game's first trailer revealed plain as day that the game would be releasing in November 2022. In marketing, these things usually have a cadence. You've got some sort of CGI teaser trailer to pique interest, then oftentimes an official reveal trailer, then further down the line you have release date trailers, followed up by some sort of supporting content, overview trailers, gameplay trailers, things like that. Starfield went, nope, threw this ambiguous idea at us and slapped a release date on it right out of the gate. Bold move, Cotton. As Livid constantly reminds me, trying to create an expansive space RPG is not something you can do overnight, and to be honest, no one has quite gotten it right yet. Even though Bethesda isn't completely reinventing the wheel here, they still promised on a main stage that players will have over 1,000 planets to explore. It's beyond ambitious, and thus was a surprise to, I think, no one when the team announced the game would be delayed into 2023, which honestly still seems a bit too early if you're expecting there to be the depth of any of those 1,000 planets. In my opinion, this is a smart, necessary decision, especially after the disaster that was the launch of Fallout 76. Bethesda needs a win, badly, and a bloated, buggy AAA space game is exactly what the team, and at this point their parent company, Microsoft, hope to avoid. The next delay on our list is a game I'm still having a hard time processing: Hogwarts Legacy. The game is easily the most ambitious title to take place in the Harry Potter universe, and while Legacy takes place well before the adventures of the books, I personally think that actually liberates the game from being too beholden to all of the ways Harry Potter has seeped into our culture. The thing that really gets me about Hogwarts Legacy is that up until the delay, the game pretty much had the spotlight to itself. Outside of Callisto Protocol, which I argue probably don't share the same audience, Hogwarts Legacy had everything to gain from a pre-holiday 2022 release. With the game being pushed back to February, things get a little more complicated. If we look at this year's February lineup, it was absolutely a cluster. Dying Light 2, Horizon Forbidden West, a huge Destiny 2 expansion, Sifu, and oh yeah, Elden Ring. Overlapping releases really isn't good for anyone, and while we all survived the plight of too many games coming out in February, things are already shaping up to repeat themselves next year. Hogwarts Legacy is just one of potentially a handful of big games that could be coming out early in 2023. We know Deliver Us Mars is already slotted for a February release, but recent rumors also indicate that games like Dead Island 2 could share that same time frame. That's not to mention games like Starfield and Final Fantasy 16, which could also jump on the second-month bandwagon. Hogwarts Legacy was in primo position, and now things aren't quite so perfect as we flip the calendar to 2023, but hopefully the game can use those 2 months wisely to polish and perfect. Let's call a spade a spade. It's an awesome-looking Harry Potter game, and it's not going to have much trouble getting headlines, but still, if the game doesn't live up to its namesake, that could spell big trouble come February. Next on both mine and Livid's list is a game we bet a good number of you forgot about: Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. This game has been on our must-play list since day one, and sadly, it's one of the titles we know the least about. What's most important about this entire project is that Rocksteady Studios, the team developing the game, are in familiar territory. This is far from their first superhero game, and for those that don't know, Rocksteady was the driving force behind most of the Batman Arkham games. Not all of them, and not alone, but you'd be ridiculous not to assume the team has a firm handle on the open-world superhero action genre. Suicide Squad was originally slated for a 2022 release, and while we've seen a few trailers and a bit of information here and there, it's pretty clear the game wasn't ready for the masses, as no hard release date was ever put on the title. In a tweet, the studio announced the game would be delayed into spring 2023, but still remain coy on an actual date. My guess is we'll see the official release date trailer at the Game Awards later this year, which makes sense given that it would most likely set the stage for a Q1 release. That being said, keep your eyes on February, as I expect that month, once again, will get jam-packed. The next game on our list is here more as a joke than anything else. Y'all remember Ubisoft's grand reveal of Avatar: Frontiers of Pandora? No? I don't blame you. This was one of the weirdest reveals, made stranger by the fact that almost nothing about the game is still known. In July 2022, Ubisoft revealed they'd be delaying the game into 2023 or even 2024, which makes sense as there's no clear evidence to support one way or the other what the game is, how it will be received, all the things you need to know to release a game. There was a lot of talk at the time that the Ubisoft Avatar game was supposed to line up with the release of the new Avatar movie, but unless Ubisoft has some top secret plan to release this game in January, there's no way this is even remotely possible, as the new Avatar Way of Water movie is hitting theaters this December. Simply put, the pieces just don't line up. The game has yet to showcase anything of substance to fans that would otherwise be interested in buying the game. Ubisoft's next Forward event is taking place on September 10th, and I wouldn't be surprised if Avatar didn't show up during the entire showcase. That being said, the 15 million views on the initial reveal trailer is indication enough that there's a fan base at least interested in the idea of a solid open-world Avatar game. Another game that was originally set to release in 2022 was Forspoken. Now this one is a bit interesting, as I don't think people are clamoring at the gates to play Forspoken. In fact, over the last few months, it's pretty clear the developers and the community that would normally play these types of games are on different pages. That being said, it's a game that's been out there in the universe for a decent amount of time now, and the premise is at least interesting. The game, developed by a subsidiary of Square Enix, follows the story of Frey, a New Yorker that gets transported to a fantasy world. With the help of a sentient bracelet, she's gifted magical abilities and must use those to fight her way back to her reality. The gameplay pieces we've seen have been interesting, to say the least. There's a lot of flippy-dippy action combat that you're kind of used to seeing in Japanese-developed games, but there's been a lot of issue taken to the presentation of the game, the writing, and how the entire package is coming together. Not to mention, this isn't the first time this game has been delayed. A few folks have speculated that the delay is to free up Square Enix to push out their latest Final Fantasy game in the last quarter of this year. And let's be honest, Square Enix desperately needs a win, so they're not going to bet on an unknown title to deliver that. Because Forspoken is a brand new IP, it needs a relatively strong marketing push to get people even aware of the game's existence. And at this point, I think that's an uphill battle, one the team can overcome, but still a challenge nonetheless. If you're a Nintendo fan, chances are you're eagerly awaiting any scrap of news regarding the yet-to-be-named sequel to Breath of the Wild. The game was originally set to release sometime this year, but all the way back in March, the team announced they were moving the release window to 2023. This is a bit of a contrast from some of the other games on this list. We're not talking a month or two here, we're talking more like a year, and that's a big deal. Usually a delay that long indicates some major work yet to be done on the game. In some cases, that could even mean a complete rework of some or all of the game. Long story short, we still don't know much about Breath of the Wild 2 or whatever they decide to call it, but knowing Nintendo, there will be a Nintendo Direct leading into the release so that it doesn't come as a complete shock to the fan base. If I'm being honest, the game doesn't have the most hype behind it at this point, but it's easily one of the biggest names on this list. The next game on our list is truly the victim of a terrible situation. Stalker 2: Heart of Chernobyl, a game being developed by GSC Game World, is the long-anticipated sequel to the 2007 game Stalker. At the beginning of the year, the game was delayed until early December to give the team time to polish and perfect their first-person shooter survival horror game. A month later, the developer's home country, Ukraine, was invaded by Russia. This isn't a joke or some plot in a game, it's the reality of the situation, and as any reasonable person would expect, the game took a back seat to the war. What I truly admire about the team developing the game is that they really never went dark on their community. If you scroll through their Discord, there are plenty of updates from the team, and that's incredible given the situation. I think everyone with half a brain understood that it was less about when is the game going to be out and more about, are you all okay? Since the war broke out, the team has relocated a majority of their operations out of the country and is working to finish their project, but that December release date is no longer on the table. You might still see it floating around when trying to pre-order, but numerous reports indicate the game is definitely getting pushed out until next year. We have to throw a bone to our friends over at Hytale because, whether you choose to believe it or not, the game's earliest possible release date is 2023. I, for one, have no illusion that this ambitious sandbox creative game will be ready when we hit the new year, but I didn't want it to completely fall off your radars. Since 2018, Livid and I have been following the game's every move, and it's still a title we have big plans for here on the channel. But at this point, there's really no indication one way or the other that the game is ready for mass consumption. The final game on our list today is Planet of Lana, a title both Livid and I have been eagerly keeping our eyes on. We're suckers for beautiful story-driven puzzle games. Pitch us a game like Ori and the Will of the Wisps or Kena Bridge of Spirits, and we're there. Little is known about Planet of Lana because, quite frankly, revealing too much would ruin what I hope is an incredible adventure. However, what we do know is that the game is 100% delayed until spring 2023. It's a pretty standard story. The team wants more time to create the game they had originally envisioned, not some scaled-back, corner-cut version, and that's commendable. Indie games don't usually have much name ID, so making sure the experience is as near perfect as possible becomes that much more important. In the case of Planet of Lana, the team is also now leaning on Microsoft to help soften that blow of the delay, announcing at the same time that the game would be going live on Game Pass at launch. I realize this game isn't going to be everyone's cup of tea, but it's one that we saw and immediately fell in love with. It's a bummer it's being pushed out to 2023, but I get it. First impressions mean everything, especially for an indie game. There are quite a few other games that didn't quite make this list but fall into pretty much the same category, like Deliver Us Mars, Redfall, and Flintlock, just to name a few. Things are most definitely going to change, what with Gamescom, Ubisoft Forward, and the Game Awards still ahead this year, but as far as 2022 is concerned, I think pretty much everything that could move has. It's honestly a fascinating thing watching game after game fall victim to delays. Do you blame it on COVID, war, inflation, or a mix of everything and anything that could impact a studio to make that decision? Obviously, we as fans can't change much, but it's sure setting us up for a very interesting and potentially fully loaded 2023. If you found this video helpful or enjoyable, do me a solid and hit that thumbs up and consider subscribing. There are still a few big games coming out in 2022, and if you're looking for a new take on some of the year's biggest titles, we've got you covered. I also want to let you know that our 2022 Leave a Legacy charity event is set for Saturday, October 22nd. For a second year in a row, we've partnered with Connecticut Children's to help bring the joy of video games to kids at the hospital. Mark your calendar, set a reminder, and be sure to join us on Discord to stay up to date on everything regarding our upcoming event. That link, of course, is below. My name is Codiak, and from everyone here at Legacy Gaming, thanks for watching, and play on.